Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name's Aaron and this is going to be the first video on my channel. It's going to be a horror related channel, so it's going to be film reviews, maybe true crime related stuff, things like that. So if that's something you guys would be interested in watching, then feel free to subscribe. And the first video I'm going to post on this channel is going to be a top 10 favourite horror films. So it's going to be my favourite top 10 horror films, not particularly the best top 10 horror films. So it'll be open to interpretation whether you guys think it is a good list or not. Obviously I'd be interested to hear feedback, but for me it's going to be compiled of things like what I found nostalgic, what I think is a good film that I would keep coming back to and watching. Without further ado, let's just get straight into the list. Number one on the list is Halloween. Mainly the whole franchise really, just because it's obviously a classic. It's got most of the components that you would expect in a horror film. Some of the films aren't that great, i.e. number Halloween 3. Halloween 6 is a bit hit and miss. The main best ones are Halloween 1 and 2. 4 and 5 are pretty good. The new Halloween film and the Rob Zombie remakes. I know that's a bit controversial. A lot of people don't like the remakes by Rob Zombie, but I think that they're a really good take on the franchise. Number 2 is the Evil Dead remake. I did like the originals, but I just find them a bit cheesy and not as well put together. I know it was a different time, things weren't as easy to recreate and things like that, but the remake, I think they had a really good storyline. The actors were really good in it, and it was such a better story. Number 3 is a film called Dolls, which is mainly this is on the list because of the nostalgia. It was one of the first horror films I ever watched when I was little, and it left an impression on me. It scared my sister so much that she won't go anywhere near Dolls anymore. But for me, it didn't scare me in that sense, but it did give me a new perspective on horror. Well, yeah, it was like the first horror film I ever watched, so it was kind of like something you would never think of. So, and at this point I hadn't watched Child's Play. So yeah, Dolls is a really good film. If you've never watched Dolls, it's about a family that are stuck in the middle of nowhere. They find a house for shelter. They break in, and the people that live there are doll makers. I think maybe they're into like witchcraft, that kind of thing. And basically they turn people into dolls. It's quite an interesting film. It's not one to watch if you're into scary horror films, but it's kind of a good film to watch. It's one that I keep coming back to watch. If you've seen the film, let me know what you guys think. Number 4 is American Werewolf in London, a film that I watched when I was quite young. Left quite an impression on me. It's scary for its time, and it's definitely a classic. It's one that I think most people are gonna know, and one that I would highly recommend people watch if they haven't seen it. Number 5 is another classic, The Exorcist. One that leaves an impression, definitely. The effects in it for its time were really good. Definitely one that you would come back to and watch over and over. The dog next door is just having a bit of a fit, so you just have to excuse that. It's something that happens. So hopefully you can't hear it too badly. But number 6 is The Conjuring 2. I did like the first one, but the second one, I think, because I live in England, The Conjuring 2 was a bit more. I remember the story. No, obviously I don't remember it because it was like, was it the 70s that story happened? But I obviously know of the story more than I do the ones that are American based. yes, The Conjuring 2 kind of reminds me a bit of how my childhood was, because that's kind of how childhood was back in like the 80s, early 80s. So it kind of takes me back to a place in time as well. So I do kind of identify with that kind of thing. Obviously nothing like that ever happened to me, but you know, it's one of those that I would watch and be nostalgic about. Number 7 is The Lost Boys. This is, I don't know if you would class it as a horror film or not, but to me when I watched it, it was a horror film. Oh, so Lost Boys is classed as a 15, so it's not really classed as a horror film. But I'm going to list it as a horror film because for me, it was quite scary at the time, and even now if I watch it, it does freak me out a little bit. So The Lost Boys is a vampire film. If you don't know it, I think most people, anyone that's going to be watching a top 10 horror film video on YouTube, these are films you're probably going to know. So I don't need to go too much in depth. Number 8 is a Stephen King classic, Carrie. I could have picked any number of them really. Pet Sematary, The Shining. Misery, is that a horror film? Probably not. But Carrie was the one that sticks out to me because maybe I identify more with that one, I don't know. But yeah, for me Carrie, it's another one of those that I will keep coming back to and watching, and if I want to introduce someone to horror, that would be one of the films I would introduce them to. Number 9, it's another obvious one, Nightmare on Elm Street, just because it broke the mould when it came out. It was one of those that we hadn't seen before. It was like a new thing that had come out. People hadn't thought of before, and when I first watched it, I don't think I didn't sleep for the whole 24 hours of watching it, just because obviously it left such an impression on me. But I think I watched it when I was about maybe 13, 14. Left quite an impression on me, that one. But again, it's an obvious one that I will always come back to and keep watching because it's just one of those fun horror films to watch. Number 10 is Final Destination. I remember when I first watched this one at the cinema, and again it's another one that kind of broke the mould. It isn't something that we'd seen before, and I found it quite interesting. I found it quite an interesting concept. They got a bit diluted as it went on, and it went more for a bit like how Saw's gone, where it's more about how extravagant we can make the deaths. But the first one, second one, maybe third, are all really good films. Probably should have just stayed at 3, and that had been it. Those are the top 10 horror films that I would always come back to and keep watching. It'd be interesting to hear what you guys would put as your top 10 favourite horror films. Not particularly the best horror films ever, but your top 10 that you think are the best, or ones that you guys would always watch. Video. This is just an introduction to me to what kind of films I'm interested in. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see what you guys think about which ones are the best, and I will speak to you in my next video. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.